On the afternoon of June 9, 1971, a blind pianist named Arthur Weeks sat down at a Steinway Grand in a recording studio in Chicago and played a song in one take. One take. No overdubs, no second attempt. The song had no title. It had no lyrics. It was approximately 4 minutes and 20 seconds long, and it had been inside Arthur Weeks for, by his own account, 11 years. Arthur Weeks was 43 years old. He had been blind since birth. He had been playing piano since he was 4, taught initially by his mother, who was not a musician in any professional sense, but who had a piano in her living room in the Bronville neighborhood of Chicago, and who understood, earlier than most mothers would have understood, that her son's relationship to the instrument was not ordinary. By the time Arthur was 12, he was playing at church. By the time he was 16, he was playing at dances and social events in the smaller clubs that populated the South Side. By the time he was 20, he had developed a style that defied easy categorization. Not jazz, though it drew from jazz. Not classical, though his technique was classical in its precision. Not gospel, though the emotional territory it covered was closer to gospel than to anything else. Something that belonged to him specifically, that had been assembled from everything he had absorbed across 20 years of playing by ear in a world he had never seen. He had made 2 recordings, both modest, both critically noticed in the limited circles where his kind of music was paid attention to, neither commercially significant. He supported himself by teaching piano. He had 30 students at any given time. He charged $3 a lesson. He worked 6 days a week. And he carried, for 11 years, a piece of music he could not finish. He could hear it. This was his description, given in an interview he made for a Chicago public radio station in 1984. He said he could hear the complete thing, every note, every transition, every moment where the music did what it needed to do. He could hear it perfectly. He could not play it. Not because of any technical limitation, not because his hands couldn't find what his mind heard, because when he sat down to play it, something changed. The act of playing, the physical reality of the hands on the keys, the breath, the posture, the presence of the instrument, changed the music slightly from what he heard when he was away from the piano. Just slightly, just enough. Enough that what came out was close, but not it. He described 11 years of sitting down to play it and stopping. Not from frustration, from the specific, patient recognition of someone who knows the difference between close and right. He described stopping mid-phrase, sometimes mid-note, sitting with his hands in his lap, waiting for close to become right. The recording session on June 9, 1971, had not been booked for this piece. Arthur had been hired to record 2 short pieces for a documentary film being produced by a Chicago filmmaker named Elaine Foster. The pieces she needed were simple and functional, background music, specifically requested to be quiet and unobtrusive. He recorded both pieces in the morning. 2 hours of work. Clean recordings. Exactly what Elaine Foster had asked for. In the afternoon, the studio was still booked. Elaine was reviewing the morning recordings in the control room. The engineer, a man named Curtis Wall, was in the booth. Arthur was at the piano, not playing, just sitting with his hands on his knees. Then he started. Curtis described what he heard. He said Arthur Weeks had been in his studio many times over the previous 6 years. He knew his playing. He knew the repertoire. He knew the quality. He did not recognize what he was hearing. He said he checked the equipment automatically, the reflex of an engineer who hears something extraordinary and immediately checks whether the extraordinary is coming from the instrument or from the machinery. Everything was normal. The extraordinary was coming from the instrument. Curtis did not interrupt. He pressed record. He watched the levels. He stayed completely still. 4 minutes and 23 seconds. When Arthur finished, the studio was quiet. He sat at the piano with his hands in his lap. He did not ask if it had been recorded. He did not ask for playback. He said one thing. "That's the one," Arthur said. Curtis told him it had been recorded. He told him the levels had been right. He told him he had captured all of it. Arthur nodded. He stayed at the piano for a few minutes more. Then he stood. He found his cane. He went to get his coat. Elaine Foster had heard everything from the control room. She came out. She asked Arthur about the piece. He described the 11 years, the hearing it completely, the not being able to play it right, the specific distance between close and right. Elaine asked what had changed today. Arthur thought about it. "Nothing," he said. Elaine waited. "The piece changed," Arthur said. "Not me." He paused. "I think it was finally ready," he said, "to be played by someone who could only get close." Close was enough for today. The recording was included on an album Arthur released in 1972 on a small independent label. The album sold modestly. It found a specific audience of people who played it repeatedly and described it to other people with the urgency of someone who has found something they cannot entirely explain. Over the following decades, the recording moved through the underground networks of music appreciation, passed from hand to hand, copied to cassette, cited in small publications that covered the margins of jazz and classical and the undefined territory between them. A music critic writing in 1989 described it as the most complete expression of interior architecture in recorded piano music he had encountered. He did not explain what he meant by interior architecture. He did not need to. The people who understood the phrase already knew the recording. The people who heard the recording understood the phrase. Arthur Weeks taught piano until he was 78 years old. He died in 2006. He had 30 students in his final year, $3 a lesson, which he had raised to 20 by 1990 and then lowered back to 15 because he felt 20 was too much. His students, in the years since his death, have described their lessons with a consistency that suggests he was teaching something specific and that they only partially understood it at the time. They describe him telling them the same thing in different ways across years of weekly lessons. That the music already exists, complete somewhere, and the playing is the reaching. And getting close is not failure. Getting close is the work. "That's the one," he had said, on a Tuesday afternoon in Chicago in 1971, after 11 years. One take, 4 minutes and 23 seconds. The reaching that finally arrived. And the music that had been waiting, patient as music always is, for someone close enough to play it.